The purpose must be so simple that your grandmother who doesn't work in mining can understand this. That purpose is what drives people. It must not become so complicated.
Leadership is doing what's right for your team, even when it's hard.
Why don't you rather go to an English-speaking country or go back to South Africa? You'll become a general manager so much faster. You're going to put yourself behind by going and doing that.
If you were to write a book, what would be the subject matter of it?
I've heard a lot about the 5 a.m. club. I want to write the 10 p.m. club book.
What advice would you give to 25-year-old Mia Gous to help you lead a better quality life? Mia Gous, welcome to Hearts and Minds.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you again. I was just reflecting on the way here. I think we've known each other for 6 or 7 years.
That's right.
Initially, of course, I made contact with you when you were in Chile. So I thought I'd start this conversation by reading a passage from our book, Smart Value, because you're referenced in it. And for those of our listeners who aren't familiar with Smart Value, it's a book that we published a couple of years ago based on research that Ivy and Gecko conducted into the talent management strategies and practices of mid-tier mining companies in Australia. And we address the life cycle of the executive employee from attraction to hiring, development, and so on. But the reference to you in the book, Mia, appears in a section that we've titled The Levers of Value Creation, and it's all about engagement. So let me read this and then I'll get a reaction from you. For us, a memorable example of leadership was shown by Mia Gous. We first approached Mia several years ago at a time when she was managing a major copper mine in Chile. Knowing something about her reputation in the industry, we reached out to Mia, wanting to know more about her accomplishments and her longer-term career plans. With an informed understanding of opportunities and locations that would potentially interest her, some months later, we identified an opening with a company that we thought would be an excellent fit for Mia. She agreed, and in-depth discussions and meetings followed. Some weeks later, after further reflection, Mia decided, for all the right reasons, not to pursue the opportunity. She recounted the sight of her dedicated Chilean workers boarding a bus one dark morning to commute to the mine site. Mia stood there, she said, and exchanged waves with her people. The trust and the loyalty were deep. After years of working together and managing the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, Mia decided in that moment, despite the personal and career benefits of an alternative position on the other side of the world, that she'd remain with her people to see them through that challenging time in Chile. We understood and respected her reasoning. So did our client. This event stays in our mind because it shows courageous and selfless behaviour by a leader. Mia understood the value of her people, and she also understood her value to them. They needed her, and she needed them. They had built a trusting relationship that was resilient to a crisis and impervious to the temptations of self-interest. There you go, Mia. What reaction do you have, and what further reflections of your time in that moment?
Thanks, David. And just firstly, I was very honored that you put me in your book, so thank you very much. I think as you read, I do feel sort of like transported back to that day because it was a pivotal decision. You don't take any career decision lightly, and I remember it was just as COVID had really started to hit, and in South America it was quite big, and Chile was no exception to that. And we had sort of started thinking of a move to Australia already at that stage. But when I remember sitting at the table in our kitchen just before that, and with everything that was happening, I, as a leader, was very scared as well. I mean, you don't know what's happening. This is one of the biggest things happening to the world, not just to one country. And my husband said, "It's your job as a leader to go. You're gonna go, and you're gonna be the leader that they need." And I remember we made the decision that we're gonna go and stand at the buses, and there was probably one of the first times that COVID had really gone big in Chile, and we knew that our people were really safe at the mine because of everything we put in place. But now they're going out back to their families, into the world that's out there. And I remember seeing fear in people's eyes, and that fear, that speaks to you as a leader if care of your people is really important. And I think the thing that just got me was as the buses, because they just stand next to each other and then they start reversing and driving away. And usually when people get into the bus, they go to sleep because it's quite a long drive. And that morning, they opened the little curtains and they waved, and it just touched me so much. And I just felt, I can't, as a leader, be thinking of packing my bags and leaving in a moment that is so critical. And we just cancelled everything. And I've never regretted it. And it was probably one of the biggest learnings of my life, was being there with the leadership team through that difficult period, as many other leaders all across the world had.
I think you've defined a few qualities of leadership there, Mia, and we'll address those in a little while. But before we do that, let's unpack, if we may, some of your early formative years. What can you tell us about your childhood? Where did you grow up, and what was it like at the time?
Thanks for that question, David. I grew up in South Africa in the 70s. It was a very carefree period. We would, we had a free lifestyle. Your parents only started worrying about you when the street lights came on and you're not home yet. It was a nice period to grow in, but it was also a period that when you grow up in it, you don't realize it until you're older and can understand. And you realize you grew up in apartheid, and you grew up in a country where equality was completely unbalanced. And then learning from that and starting to appreciate the importance of equality and the rights that people have, and realizing you've grown up in privilege, but you can fight for everybody to get that same equality. It sort of shapes you, and it opens your mind to different cultures and differences of people, and accepting everybody for who they are.
You would have been very, very aware, of course, of the context of South Africa at that stage, the incarceration of Nelson Mandela and the fight for social justice. How impactful was his release to you in terms of the future of South Africa? And I guess we're talking, aren't we, late 1990s?
1904 or 5, I
Is
think.
it? Okay.
Yeah. I was at university at that stage, and at university you become much more educated on what has actually been happening for so long. And I think the thing that I always appreciate most was for somebody like him to come out of prison and to talk about peace and talk about having the conversations, being a leader to people by bringing people together and not trying to divide them further. That is what was so incredible about that time.
And I think the world cries out today for the moral leadership and the maturity of leadership that he demonstrated. I remember my first encounter with South Africa, Mia. It was as a 9-year-old boy, I think, in 1971. My family were emigrating from the UK to Australia. And one of the 2 stop-offs in the month-long journey on the ship was Cape Town. And I can visualise now the tabletop mountain and the tasting pineapple for the first time. But I remember getting on the bus with my dad during the day that we had there, and I remember saying to him, "Dad, why are all the dark-skinned people at the back of the bus and all of the white people at the front?" And the concept of apartheid was, I didn't understand it, and I'd never heard of it. And then he explained the segregation, and it really affected me. And it's interesting, isn't it, the things that you recall from a long, long time ago. But a beautiful country based on my limited exposure to it.
What a journey that must have been.
Yeah, it was. It was a great one. Mia, you've worked for large global mining companies. How do you compare the value of the different experiences that you've gained from working in different places in the world and living with different cultures?
I think the journey is so much richer if you have got different cultures to experience. So I remember when I just arrived in Chile, you sort of think if you've come from mining, you'll be okay. You know the background and the setup, and then you come into a culture that is so completely different to the ones you've lived in before. And I remember my general manager at that stage, he said to me, 2 years to learn the commodity, 2 years to learn the language, and 2 years to learn the culture. And I always wondered, is he stacking these 2 years up? Is it going to take 6, or can I do them in parallel,
Yeah.
But it was true.
Yeah.
I mean, you learn different commodities as you travel, because different countries have got different strengths in different commodities. It was the first time I worked in copper. I worked in smelting before, but it's different. So I think the thing is that you broaden your vision, and you can think of what has worked maybe in another commodity that can work here. So you can populate some innovative ideas and technologies that you've seen work, because often if you've been in one commodity your whole life, you don't necessarily challenge and go and look outside what there is to learn. And then I think the language was it was such a barrier. I was so naive thinking that you can go anywhere in the world and everybody can speak a little bit of English. And we arrived there and we just realized that is just not the case. And I think it taught me, especially in the beginning, to be more attentive to people's body language and their facial expressions, because I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I can see how they're acting. And then you just, it develops different skills if you're confronted with some things that you always took for granted and then don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And then I think the other thing is just the incredible nature of people that are willing to help you on your journey, people that teach you the language on your journey, teach you the culture. In different cultures, there's different ways of managing people. Some cultures are very much, the hierarchy. If you say something, they will go and do it. Well, other cultures will question and they'll need that explanation about why is this the route that we're going to choose. So it develops your management skills in different ways and different levels.
You raise some interesting points there. And as an executive recruiter, I'm always attracted to standout candidates who have a couple of aspects to their background. One is that they have experienced different cultures, different locations, different commodities, different ways of living, because over time I've learned that helps enhance a person's EQ. It raises their ability to be self-aware, to have empathy, and to be tolerant and interested and curious about alternative points of view. All of these are, I think, learnable qualities that are important for leadership. And the other thing I look for is battle scars. In other words, people that have been challenged and perhaps who have experienced mistakes, failures, losses in their life, and they've managed, with the support of other people, to get back on their feet and live another day. And that builds resilience and it builds character. So it's interesting that those reflections about living in different places and experiencing different cultures have helped shape you into the leader that you are today. When you look in the rear vision mirror of your career to date, what accomplishment are you most proud of?
I think that if you study engineering and you start working in the mining industry, you work at the operation, and it's always that feeling that if I am successful, one day I want to be a general manager. And I always had this dream of becoming a general manager. And when we went to Chile, I got many people who said, it's going to be difficult. Why don't you rather go to an English-speaking country or go back to South Africa? You'll become a general manager so much faster. You're going to put yourself behind by going and doing that. But if you're stubborn, and you go and do what your heart says, and that's what we wanted to do. So when in the end I got chosen to be the general manager, that was probably one of the proudest moments I've had in my life, because it wasn't just around, it was the more difficult journey that I chose. It was also felt like a reflection and a thank you to so many people that had helped me along the journey, because it's all those mentors you have in your life preparing you for that. And especially to the people that, because I was going to do it in my third language. So everybody that took the time to teach me the language, to teach me the culture and the commodity. And I mean, at stages I couldn't understand people, and there was no Google so much then. They would like enact it or draw it on a whiteboard and so on. It was thank you to all of those people who helped me get there. And then I think because I was the first female general manager in a country like Chile in large-scale mining. So coming from South Africa, I thought it was just, you're going to be general manager and there you go. And I remember walking in our offices, and one guy called me and he says, "Look, you're on TV." And it was like this shock to think, oh, they've made a big thing about this. And it was a feeling, a little bit of responsibility that is bigger than, you're not just becoming the general manager, you're becoming the first female general manager in a country, and you feel this responsibility that for all the other females that also have this dream, you better make this work. You have to do this well.
Well, you become a role model for them, don't you? And I guess that's in your consciousness as you carry out your responsibility.
Exactly.
I can understand why you're so proud of that part of your career. I mean, Spence is a very large, complex operation to manage at the best of times, but in the context of battling COVID and being in the thick of it, it just adds another dimension of difficulty. So I can understand why you picked that moment. Looking toward the future now, what are you most looking forward to accomplishing?
I think if I'll think of it on a macro level and probably more on a personal level. I think there's still a lot for everybody in mining to do to change the image of mining. Change it for governments to see this is something good we want in our country. Change it for communities to have trust in the mining industry, to do the sustainable and right thing. And then change it for the younger generations who potentially don't see it as their favorite career to follow. Change it and show them how beautiful and how technologically advanced it has become, and how different it is from what we think of mining in our minds. And then on a personal level, as I've grown in my career, there were so many people that's given me advice and mentorship and leadership on my journey. And I feel it's payback time. So every single young engineer, young talented person, anybody who is coming on this same journey like I did, helping them, seeing them succeed, that feeling that you have of of seeing how people grow, and feeling you've had a little part in that. That is just incredible.
Yeah. Let's pull that thread a bit more. You talk about the image of the mining industry, and so many of my guests raise that as a challenge. I know you've got 2 children. Will either of them progress their careers into the mining industry, do you think? And if so, for what reasons? And if they're disinclined to enter mining, why?
That is such a good question, David. So when I was working at Spence in South America, we had these family days, and I think my eldest daughter was about 11 at that stage, and I was working FIFO at Spence, and we had this visit, and I took them there, and she was standing with a dust mask in the mine in front of a big truck, and I said, "Anne, look how fantastic this is." She looked at me, and it was as if she couldn't think, like, what are you smoking today, Mommy? I'm never going to be doing this. And I said, why are you not going to be doing this? And she said, I'm not going to leave my family. And that feeling of, my daughter is not considering this career because she just can't see herself doing what I've been doing was quite touching to hear it from her so blatantly. And she's chosen to do computer science. And the more I tell her about how much computer science and technology in the automation is now entering the mining industry and how great this career in mining can be and how it's so much different, the more I can see her listening and asking more. So it's about bringing that to the younger generation to sell, how you can work at a integrated remote operating center, and you can do programming and coding for the mining industry as well.
Well, that's right. I think, the so-called image problem of mining, we need to address it through both education and through marketing. Education in the sense that we do need to get kids curious, and we need to give them direct exposure, if we can, to what's going on at mine sites and process plants. And we need to help them understand that without the responsible extraction and processing of these minerals, the world as we know it wouldn't continue. We do badly need these minerals to enhance our society and to reduce the carbon in the air. We need certain minerals to help progress our green culture. So, and from a marketing point of view, I think, we do need to put our credentials out there as a mining industry, and with the help of government, make sure that we are pitching the right message and selling the right themes.
Exactly. And I think currently, with the importance that the mining industry just over these last even few months have had, and how much talk has been happening in the media around the importance of critical minerals, our younger children and the younger generation is starting to understand how important this role is and wanting to be part of it because the mining industry has changed so much.
When you're not concentrating on your work, Mia, what do you do to relax?
I spend time with my family, love cooking, love being in the garden and just being home, because I think our careers take, especially in mining, we travel a lot. We have to go to the operations and we spend long hours there and at the office. So for me, being relaxed together with my family is what really makes me relax. But then also I do like meeting people, that networking with other people in the mining industry, meeting people for a coffee, sharing, finding out is there anything you need, or just comparing notes and building each other up, because sometimes that's all you need is just somebody who knows your world and can actually can give you some advice, or sometimes you need that advice.
You do have a very busy position and a big responsibility as a regional operations manager at First Quantum Minerals. To the extent that you do have a typical workday, what does it look like? Can you describe to us the sequence of events that unfolds in a typical day?
So I think I have two modes. So one is when you're at the operation. So it's traveling, getting there, trying to be at the morning meetings where the handovers happen, where you can do the safety discussions, and then walking around in the operation, having conversations with people, finding out what their realities are, what is the important things for them, and then in the evening as well, the social, especially on the FIFO sites, is having those conversations with people. And at the office, for me, the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is I want to read the news. I want to know what's happened while I was asleep. And I read the news from, I sort of have a connection to South Africa, Chile, the UK, and Australia. So I sort of try and scan what's happened in each of the countries.
And these days it's not always an uplifting experience hearing the news, is it?
It's not, but I think there's importance of knowing what's happening in the bigger world, and then going through my emails and making sure I'm updated, getting to the office. Working at a global operation, you often have that challenge that your day isn't very well set out in a 9 to 5. So when the UK wakes up, so a lot of the meetings, because I also look at one of the operations in Mauritania, so some things really start only really getting busy by 1 or 2 o'clock as Africa and the Europe time zone wakes up. And some days I've got meetings that only start at 10 o'clock in the evening when we have conversations with some of the Latin American operations. So it's different days. When I know I've got a late night meeting that only going to start at 10, I sort of try and put a lot of other late evening meetings on the same day so that you can have one day that you know this is going to be a long afternoon, evening day. And then the next day is going to be a normal morning. It doesn't always work out like that, but you have to pace yourself and you make sure that you balance your life and you work across the time zones.
Yeah, certainly. And you must take time out to recharge the batteries. I think too many busy executives go 7 days a week for months without having a decent break. Tell me, I confess I have a bit of email anxiety first thing in the morning. So before I open the laptop, I always feel slightly anxious about what's in store for me. Do you share that, or do you just welcome the uncertainty of what's going to be on your desk?
Once I have anxiety, I mean, there's emails that looking at what's happened in production, looking at what's happened on the sites. It's sort of like a little bit of a thrill. And if you see there hasn't been any safety incident, it's like a good feeling. If you see we've done a good production, so it can go both ways. You can have a good or a maybe more challenging set of emails to read. But I do like reading them before I actually get to the office because I feel more prepared.
Right.
So for me, it's sort of one of those things that in order to show up as a leader prepared and ready, I want to have read them. So I sort of look at it as a good thing that I'm in front of whatever is going to be there. I also leave it to late at night as well. So usually my morning meetings is only the ones that's come through in the midnight hours.
We've mentioned some important leadership qualities so far in our discussion, Mia. If you had to pick 3 that you think are absolutely mission critical for being an effective leader who can engage well with people and build a strong culture, what would those critical leadership qualities be?
The 3 I'll call out is that relationship. You have to have a relationship with your people. They need to trust you. And trust doesn't mean you have to always do the nice thing and do things that they want. Trust is to be fair and consistent. So building that relationship first, and secondly, that trust. And trust is based on the fairness and the consistency of your decisions. And then the third one, which is really important, is purpose. You have to create purpose. And I have a friend, she has, during different periods, we've worked on putting empowerment groups under rapid results in our businesses. And she always said the purpose must be so simple that your grandmother who doesn't work in mining can understand this. Because if you can break a purpose down to simplicity for different levels of the company, but it's the same purpose, but it must be sketched right so that the level that is working on this have the power to influence it.
Yes.
That purpose is what drives people. It must not become so complicated that it can be anything that they perceive it to be. It needs to be very clear.
Yeah, well
We're
said.
going for safe 200,000 tons this year, or safe 700,000 ounces.
And the purpose needs to be backed up with an understanding and an embracement of certain shared values that define the culture. I'm a big believer in the fact that everybody's got a certain set of values, things that are really important to them, and that's completely fine. We need that diversity of values, but there must be a few key ones, core ones, that everybody believes in and shares. You know, for Ivy and Gecko, for example, our core values are care, courage, and imagination. And we talk a lot about that within our organisation, the meaning of those three words. Someone once said to me, in response to my question of what is leadership, what does it mean to you, they said, it's very simple. And they gave me a one-sentence response, and it was, leadership is doing what's right for your team, even when it's hard. And I thought, yeah, what a good, simple, short response to the question. And that part on the end, even when it's hard, implies that a good leader needs courage. It's not all plain sailing, clearly, no matter what you do. You'll always have critics, and you'll always have people that feel a degree of resentment or disappointment with decisions that you make. But you've got to weigh up the totality of the team and the purpose of the organisation and make those hard calls. Not everyone's comfortable with that, but in my view, it's so important.
So true.
How do you articulate First Quantum Minerals' employer value proposition? In other words, what do you think differentiates your brand from other mining companies that are pursuing the same talented people?
I think it's to building on the previous question in your comments as well. Our values are bolder, smarter, driven together, and it's all in that. So I think First Quantum is a company that is very much weighted into copper. So it's a commodity that has got a purpose that is really good for us as humankind in terms of the electrification and the sustainability of our world. But I think being a global company as well, it creates that for if you're somebody like me, you like different cultures, so you can come in and there's a lot of movement of people across the different businesses. And then what I do think is something that stands out for me from First Quantum is the way that projects get done. I mean, they've got an in-house projects department that can go and they build estuary in Zambia, they build a concentrator, they build the Panama, and they don't hand you the keys once the project has been built. They're so invested in the success, and they keep on going even after the project has been executed to make sure that it gets to the nameplate production. So having such expertise, if you go into the company and you meet people, a lot of people have been there for many years because they are valued as people in the business. And the company at this stage is at the cusp of growing, especially within Latin America. So our challenge is still to get our corporate Panama operation up and running. And then we've just released our technical report for the Taca Taca project in Argentina, which is a 35-year life of mine copper gold porphyry project. And the opportunity of going into Argentina is massive for us. So being part of that story is pretty special.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like an exciting company. And it's interesting, Mia, we in our book Smart Value, one of the aspects of research we did was to ask a lot of people, over 350 executive level people, what they looked for in a prospective new employer company. And the findings, we developed an acronym to describe it and to remember it. And the acronym is POLICE. So a candidate looks at the position, obviously the scope of the responsibility, the challenge of them. O stands for organisation, the reputation of the business. L stands for leadership. This was a really big one. The perceived quality of leadership at both the executive level and the governance level, the board. I stood for incentives, reward, financial and otherwise. And the CE, cultural ethos. So out of those 5 pillars, if you like, of attraction to a company, the ones that were most heavily weighted were leadership and cultural ethos. They were so important, critically important, and if the candidate was not sufficiently convinced about those 2 areas, doesn't matter how good the other aspects were, they tend to look at alternatives. Interesting piece of research. Let's talk a bit about culture. It gets a lot of airtime in the media, and I spend half my life talking with people about it. In your opinion, why should you pay attention to culture?
I think it's exactly what you've just said. Culture is what attracts people and it's what keeps people as well. Because sometimes people will come to a company because of a position, because of a reward, but it's the culture that's going to keep them there. And you can go and you can work on strategies, you can work on your operational excellence and everything. But if you don't have the right culture, your people are not going to stay and you're not going to potentially be successful. But if you've got that right culture where you empower people, where people feel valued and they trust the leadership, you can face many challenges and still be successful. And that's what makes the difference.
You've mentioned trust quite a few times in this conversation, and absolutely it is the bedrock of any relationship, business or social. I remember someone saying to me once, 90% of strategy is execution, 90% of execution is people, 90% of people is culture. So, sure, we need clever people with clear visionary ability to be able to manufacture a strategy for a company, but at the end of the day, it is the people that execute it, and it's those people that help develop a culture which sustains the business over the long term. In terms of the business metrics that are evident when we've got a good culture, all of the important ones head in the right direction. If we've got a culture that in which people feel comfortable and safe to voice their opinion, to contest other people's ideas and to challenge the status quo. If the culture is safe and inclusive, evidence shows that safety improves, innovation improves, engagement and improves, staff turnover reduces, ultimately profitability increases. All of the important financial and business metrics improve when we've got the development of a good culture.
I think that's so important. And I think one of the first signs that your culture is changing for the good is if you actually get people who report hazards, who report who do speak up, who says stop this work. We have to get the safety at a higher level before we continue, because that shows that they have got that safety in which they can put up their hand and do it. And then you see the voluntary turnovers drop, you see the performance excellence climb. Everything is a result of that growing the culture in which people thrive.
Yeah. Agreed. If you had to pick one challenge facing the mining industry today, particularly in Australia, what would be the biggest challenge that you think we need to address and overcome?
I think in terms of Australia at this stage, Australia has got good benefits and good positioning in terms of being a tier one country, stable geopolitical stability, and good infrastructure. But I think our mines, some of our mines are aging. A lot of the easy to get to ore bodies have been done, and now it's more difficult. And I think another one of the challenges is just that regulatory. If you want to do an investment, you don't want surprises, you don't big changes. So if we think of our permitting, if we think of energy, and if we think of our labor market, there's high costs associated with that in Australia. And in terms of staying competitive with regards to a global company, you have to decide, am I going to put my money into Australia or am I going to put it into some other country? Well, I might have a little bit more risk on the geopolitical side, but I know exactly what the permitting route looks like. The energy costs is more beneficial, and the labor costs and productivity might be more beneficial. Australia needs to we need to make sure that we stay competitive in those decisions.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. The Fraser Institute, as I'm sure you know, most recently ranked WA as a jurisdiction to invest 17th in the world. 4 years ago, we were number 1 in the world. And largely it's due to the duplication, the bureaucratic red tape as distinct from environmental green tape. It's the bureaucracy of multiple layers of government, state, federal, that is frustrating not only miners but investors who are looking for somewhere to put their money to develop a project. And whilst Tanya Constable at the Minerals Council of Australia and AMEC also is doing their best to lobby the government to simplify proceedings and expedite the process so that there is more certainty for investors. I think we're too slow off the mark, and it's frustrating a lot of people in the industry.
I think spot on. You need speedy and efficient processing, and I don't think it's around the challenges that it brings. I think companies are willing to go and invest in making sure that we comply with all the standards. But it's that uncertainty and disruption in the regulatory processes that brings that potential extra time that will be lost, or you go through the whole process and then at the end there's something new and you get challenged to go and change a lot of things that isn't easy in the mining industry, where we have to think so many years ahead to change. That I think is going to be key.
Yeah, totally agree. It's not that we want to take shortcuts, it's that we just need a faster process. We don't want to do things that are irresponsible. We just need certainty more quickly. I think that's the nut of it. Now, before we get into the rapid fire questions, Mia, it's your turn. Do you have a question without notice for me?
I do, David. I mean, you have the absolute privilege to work with so many different people across the industry. But what gets you out of bed in the morning? What's the highlight? What makes a good day for David?
Well, look, it's thank you for the question. It's a good one, and I do get out of bed, 6 days a week with enthusiasm, and it's because I enjoy building relationships with people, whether they be candidates or clients that have engaged me to do an executive search assignment. I enjoy the evolution, the development of that relationship from a cold start very often, where you're getting to know each other and the trust is not yet fully formed. I enjoy developing a certain level of intimacy with a client or a candidate. Intimacy in the sense of getting to know their whole self. You know, when I'm talking with a candidate, I like to explore their family situation, their upbringing. You know, it all adds to the completion of the jigsaw puzzle when you know where someone's come from and what values they hold. And the same with the client. You know, if the client allows you the freedom to enter that zone, I do like to get friendly with clients because that's how trust is strengthened. You know, in my view, trust is, and I'm trying to remember the formula that Meister wrote in his book. I think he said that trust is equal to credibility. In other words, you demonstrate the value of what you know, plus reliability. In other words, you follow up and do what you've said you're going to do, plus intimacy. In other words, an understanding of the whole relationship that you're developing with a person, divided by self-interest. In other words, what you want to do is put the interests of your candidate or your client ahead of your own short-term interests. So rather than thinking of a fee that's to be paid in regards to an engagement, think of the quality of the relationship that you're going to build and the satisfaction that you'll enjoy when you've placed a person into a position for which they are well suited, and the client appreciates the value of the conversations that you've had with him along the way. To me, that's Mia. That's why I get out of bed in the morning. You know, I'm a reasonably introverted person, but I just love the social dynamic and the fact that, you know, you're juggling very often 4 or 5 or 6 executive searches, and you need to be agile and adaptable. You know, you've got this engagement for probably a couple of months or so before you turn your attention to something else. So it's a bit of a whirlwind, but yeah, that's why I've done it for 40 years.
Make people's dreams come true.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Yeah. You're right. Now let's get stuck into these rapid fire questions. What's your reason for being?
My 2 daughters.
Enough said. Perfect answer. How do you keep yourself informed? Do you watch the news on telly? Do you read newspapers? Do you listen to podcasts?
I listen to podcasts, and I do read newspapers from all over the world. So I think that's something that once you've lived in a country and you know which newspaper is the one you trust and you want to read, you just keep on reading it. So in the morning, my first 30 minutes with a cup of tea is reading through what's happening in the world.
What are your favourite newspapers that you can rely on, do you believe?
Oh, that's a tricky question. So I do like the WA online ones.
Yeah.
I do like the Sky News ones, just because they're all so well summarized.
Yeah.
I do CNN as well, and then in Chile I've got La Tercera, which I like, and I'm trying to read the one in Panama now as well. La Estrella, which is the star. So it's a little bit of all of them. And sometimes you get guided to, that's where something is happening, and then you go and read more up on there.
It's challenging, isn't it, to get a fair and comprehensive view of, in a factual way of what's going on. I find that the news feeds I get, they feed me information that they think I want to hear or read. They're designed to feed you and strengthen your biases that you've previously demonstrated. So, it's challenging to get that sort of fair, comprehensive view, I think. Are you willing to share with us one of your vulnerabilities?
I think one of my vulnerabilities, and I'm cognizant of it, so I manage it, is when you do these Myers-Briggs things, I came up as I'm quick to judge. So knowing that I'm quick to judge, I sometimes need to tell myself, no, give it another chance, or give that person another chance. And you know what? Sometimes people surprise you, and then I reflect and I think, you would have been too quick to judge there.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. I think in my view, intuition, judgment is, so important to pay attention to that. And I think it's all right saying too quick to judge might be a vulnerability, but if you're of a certain mature age and you've had a lot of experience and a lot of exposure to people, very often your quick judgment is a pretty accurate one, versus a much younger person with far less worldliness and exposure to people. If they make a quick judgment, then it may not be a good one. So I think you've got a factor in the equation. A very important one is the level of experience that you've got.
As long as you still hear your people.
Yes, you have to be open to hearing people, don't you? And not listening to them with a view to beat them or win the conversation, but with a view to trying to empathise and fully understand where they're coming from. When you think about people, living or deceased, that have demonstrated great leadership in business, sport, creative arts, who do you most admire and why? And if you had the opportunity to invite them as a guest for dinner, what would be the most important question you'd ask?
I racked my brain a little bit around that question, to be honest. And I think if I think of who I most admire is if I go to the sites and I speak to people while I'm walking around, you meet so many people that are single mothers and single fathers, and they work FIFO. And you think, what difficulties do they have? And I mean, for me, sometimes knowing I'm leaving my children with my husband when I do FIFO, leaving the house, going standing in front of the lift, waiting for the lift to come and fetch me to take me to the mine, you hear your child yelling, "Mommy, mommy, come back." And I think that's really difficult. So if I could have a big party tonight and invite everybody that I really admire in our business, it would be all those FIFO moms and dads that are single who have to leave their children with family, relatives, friends in the days that they are far at the mine.
I love that answer, and it is so different from the other 37 guests that I've had on this program, some of whom have said Jesus Christ, some of whom said Nelson Mandela, Barack Obama. No one has thought about offering a response along the lines of, the single men and women raising families and doing it tough on site. If you were to write a book, what would be the subject matter of it?
I've heard a lot about the 5 a.m. club. I want to write the 10 p.m. club book because I'm not a morning person. I want to tell people that I think, if you're not a morning person either, there's a lot of value in before you go to sleep. You can get a really good night's rest if everything is already done.
The 10 p.m. club.
The 10 p.m. club.
At all good booksellers.
Absolutely.
What energizes you?
I think conversations with people.
What drains you of energy?
Overcrowded malls.
What advice would you give to 25-year-old Mia Gous to help you lead a better quality life?
I think it's, stress less. It's difficult to do it and to listen to people who say, don't stress so much about everything. But I think the world is there's a lot of pressure, and enjoy the journey more. It goes fast. I mean, people tell you when your kids are small, enjoy the journey. But I want to say the same thing for people in the mining industry. I mean, enjoy the journey. It's a fantastic industry with so many opportunities. Grab them.
Perfect. I've really enjoyed this conversation, Mia, more than most. You are a particularly empathic, caring person and leader. So thank you for all your contributions so far to the mining industry, and I'm sure we've got a lot more to hear about you. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to all of our listeners, to Louis on the production desk here at Podwave Studio, and to my colleagues, particularly Carol and Alana, who put a lot of work in to make these episodes happen. So thanks, everybody, and look forward to you tuning in next time.
Thanks so much, David.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Hearts and Minds. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a rating or share it with a friend. And don't forget to follow us and connect on social media for updates on all of our upcoming guests. I'm Alana Bray-White, and I look forward to you joining us for our next episode.